evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another great edition of the Lap Down Podcast. I am your host, Greg Farmer, and we have a full house tonight. We have Jayme, Brett, Tyler, JP, and Ryan. It is going to be packed here tonight, just like it was at Daytona. How we doing, fellas?
Let's go. What's going on?
500 actually finished on a Sunday this year.
Alright, so before we get started, as always, I would like to give a special shout out to Will and the Alkali Project for the intro and outro music for this podcast. I've been kind of busy today, didn't really have a lineup wrote down, but I've been thinking about stuff in my head that we wanted to talk about tonight. So we're going to get started with the first topic. There was an article put out by Chris Knight from the Catch Fence journalism page that stated that Dodge is looking to come back to the Truck Series in 2026.
Yeah, I saw that.
With the Ram 1500, it looks like the last time that they were in NASCAR was in 2012 when Brad Keselowski won the Cup Series championship, and then they pulled their stakes and left the sport completely.
That was the last time they were in Cup. I thought they stayed in the Truck Series for a couple of years.
2017 is last year.
Okay, I got you. One at a time. So starting with Jayme, how do we feel about Dodge potentially coming back, and could this be a pathway back to the Cup Series for them?
I mean, I've always liked having different manufacturers in the Truck Series. I think Ram being a staple of the Truck Series when I first started watching. I remember drivers like Casey Kane and others like that driving around in those Dodge Rams. And if NASCAR is trying to go with like the body builds to make them look like the actual vehicles and show the little differences instead of the standard body cuts of the trucks, I think it's just going to look cool to see Rams out there with Silverados and all that stuff. But as far as them coming back to the Cup Series, I think we're still years away from that even being a possibility. I know Red Bulls recently came back, and there's a lot of talk about new manufacturer group being the primary use of Red Bull and all that stuff. But as of right now, I'll be excited to see it when I see it. But as of right now, it'll be cool to see, but it doesn't really bother me any right now.
All right. What about you, Brett?
I agree with Jayme. They're not going to go up to the Cup Series anytime soon. I know we've had rumors of different OEMs coming in to the Cup Series. I feel like Dodge's home is that Truck Series. I don't see them going up to the Cup anytime soon.
All right. What about you, Tyler?
I kind of like it because they got like the 90s, like early 90s, like with what's his face, Nemechek and stuff like that, right? Late early 90s, those Dodge Rams. My personal opinion is I think they're gonna probably do what like Toyota did back in the early 2000s, like it was like 2003 they came into the trucks, and then like 5 years later they built them over again. I think they're gonna rebuild themselves as like a Truck Xfinity exclusive manufacturer, and then go up the Cup once they feel like they built it up around them.
Gotcha. What about you, JP?
So I really think that I agree with the rest of you, but I'm going to throw a wrinkle into this. By 2028, they will be in the Xfinity, and 2031 they will be back in the Cup Series.
So you're giving them 6 years to be back in the Cup Series, is what you're saying?
Correct.
All right. What about you, Ryan?
So similar to actually what JP just said, is I could definitely see this being a path for Dodge to make a way back up to the Truck Series, and I was actually looking into the similarities between the potential paths for Dodge here and what we saw from Toyota when Toyota entered the Truck Series in 2004. And then about 3 or 4 years later, then added on the Xfinity Series and Cup Series in 2007. So I wouldn't be shocked if we see Dodge enter in, say, 2026 and then potentially get their engines and stuff ready for the next gen car in, say, 2028, 2029. But I would expect to see them, if they join in, I would expect them to see them probably do Xfinity and Cup in the same year. Especially if they potentially join in with a team that has a team at both levels. Say, again, this won't be the answer, but like, say, a Colleague Racing maybe, who has an Xfinity and a Cup program. Moving over to Dodge would be easier to move them over, when you have, when you're bringing them in at the same time.
All right. Well, hopefully we get a new manufacturer in pretty soon. I know there's a whole lot of rumblings been going around. We're going to move to our next topic. There was a little bit of news swirling around from a new podcast called Holler Talk that I guess Steve Phelps and Steve O'Donnell started. And they talked about on their first episode the possibility of the championship race being rotated after either this year or 2026. And we know, we all can agree kind of that we want the championship race to return to Homestead. But Jayme, what are your thoughts on the championship race possibly being rotated, and what tracks would you like to see in that rotation?
I would like seeing a rotation on the championship race. Probably just sticking with like the mile and a halves. I feel like that's where you get the best competitive matchups. I would not want to see a road course or a mile or a super speedway dictate the championship race. So I think any track, any intermediate track that would be a mile and a half would be a good rotation for it. Especially when, like, don't get me wrong, I like where they currently are. There's been some good fights for it, but Homestead's been good. I'd even like to see maybe Vegas get a look for a championship race. That track always brings some good competition as well. But that's my thoughts on it. No road courses, no super speedways, no hybrid super speedways such as like Nashville or Atlanta, but just mile and a half in general, just kind of rotate between those tracks.
Real quick point, it probably won't go to Vegas just because Vegas is owned by SMI, and currently the championship race is held at the NASCAR / formerly ISC owned tracks, between Homestead and even now Phoenix.
All right. What about you, Brett?
See, I like the idea of moving the tracks around because then, like Phoenix, Homestead, hell, I wouldn't mind it being at Darlington and, if anything, North Wilkesboro, if anything. Something like that.
North Wilkesboro for a championship race?
It's something different, something new, something.
That's very
That one,
bold.
Just giving my opinion. But that's what I don't mind them rotating the championship race. Let's go back to the class.
Everybody's entitled to their own opinions on this podcast. What about you, Tyler?
Oh, my personal opinion on on the rotating championship. I personally think they should be freaking doing rotating. I like mile and a half, like Las Vegas and stuff like that, but they are right about the SMI crap. But how I look at it is, I think get rid of Phoenix. Phoenix is stale. It's not fun anymore. It's boring. We want like places like mile and a half where the racing's actually good. That's just how I put it.
I think we can all agree. I mean, we've seen, let's see, this year will be year 5 of the championship race at Phoenix, and we saw 2020, 2021 Hendrick Motorsports, and then from 22 to last year, it was all Penske Racing. So there's a little bit of dominance going on there. What about you, JP? What are your opinions?
So, hear me out on this. Okay? Why can't NASCAR listen to the fans and actually put it to a fan vote? Give it 3 or 4 different race tracks before the end of the prior year, and the highest vote getter gets the championship.
Putting things to a fan vote does not work well. I mean, look at the Bushy McBush Race 400. I mean, that was put in there as basically a joke option on the Bush for that Bush Kansas race, and the fans went with the meme option. So if NASCAR even dares to put, say, a super speedway like Atlanta into that kind of vote, it would win just because of the meme vote.
Yeah.
So, and similarly, the fact that like NASCAR, in my opinion, this past weekend overreacted to how much Twitter was upset over the yellows thing and decided to swallow the whistle in the 500. You can't let Twitter officiate the races like that.
Yeah, we will get to that, but JP, I can answer that question with one simple word, and that word is money. You can do a fan vote, but the track that wins also has to put in a bid to host a fork over a lot of money car, and then they also have to fork over a lot of money if they have to make necessary renovations or upgrade their facilities and all that stuff. Like Homestead wants to come back, and they've put in a bid, and the last that I heard, that bid was over $75 million just to host the championship in 2026. So the simple short word on that is money.
Isn't it all these days? Money.
Yep. But Ryan, what are your thoughts on the championship rotation?
Yeah. So my idea, and this is actually something somewhat similar to what JP suggested, but not entirely leaving it up to the fans, because again, fans I don't think can be exactly trusted to make great decisions. But I think first off, I think having the championship race basically get 3-year stints at a track, because I think switching it every single year would lead to a lot of confusion for fans. I think having it in 3-year stints, like 3 years at Phoenix, I think the first 3 years it hadn't quite gotten stale. Like, sure, the races weren't that exciting or that thrilling, but through the first 3 years, I think we could all say it was a fairly serviceable track. It was in year 4 and 5 that it started to kind of get repetitive and stale. So first off, I'd like to see them do 3-year rotations and basically use some sort of formula between which one has the highest average attendance of a pre-approved tracks. Like you pre-approve like 5 or 6 tracks that all bid to get onto this list. Then you take those, say, 4 or 5 tracks, and whichever one has the best average attendance, average viewership, TV wise, and then potentially fan and potentially a fan vote as well for like another 10% of the vote, and have some sort of formula like that determines like, okay, yeah, let's say Homestead brings in 50,000 people in person, 1.5 million people on TV, and has say 90% approval rating from the fans, then Homestead would be the favorite probably. But if, say, just throwing out another idea here, or throwing out another random track here, if, say, Nashville was to go ahead and if the Nashville Superspeedway track was to, say, outsell ticket-wise or on the TV front, potentially Nashville would end up being the one. So yeah, and some sort of formula like that takes into account the tracks that are actually able to get people out to the track in person, because I think having a packed grandstand for the finale is a great look for the sport. Having a high TV rating for the finale, a great thing for the sport. And obviously, fanfare.
That's a great perspective.
Not to mention, we reward tracks for actually getting people out to the races, versus them kind of coasting on the TV money like they have been for the last several years.
Yeah. I've said it on this podcast many a times before, and call me crazy, but I cannot stand the Roval.
I thought the Roval was a good track, but anyway.
I would love to see the championship race at Charlotte on the oval one year. And if you think about it from a logistical standpoint, you have, they could literally like embrace championship weekend in Charlotte, because you have all the race shops there. The fans can go and they can, do fan days like they do for the Coke 600. It's close to home for all the teams, so they're not traveling as far. Let's say whatever team wins the championship, they can celebrate longer than normal, and they don't have to worry about catching their plane back home from Phoenix or wherever. And it's literally in the middle of NASCAR Central. Like, what better way to celebrate the championship weekend than in the middle of NASCAR Central?
And the only problem there is the fact that is an SMI-owned track, again, similar to the Las Vegas problem of it's not, NASCAR currently owns all the tracks that have held the championship race, and they aren't going to give that up to SMI without a major payment.
Atlanta Motor Speedway was owned by SMI when they had to hold the championship.
Yeah, but the last time Atlanta hosted the championship was what, 92, 93, something like that?
Nope, 2001.
Right.
No, 2001, the championship was at New Hampshire, because New Hampshire got delayed due to 9/11.
No, New Hampshire, they won, the final race was Atlanta. The championship race is in Atlanta.
Was it?
The final race, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Tyler is correct. The championship race in 01 was at Atlanta, but they did make up the New Hampshire race right after Atlanta.
Wait, so they made up the New Hampshire race after the championship finale?
Only day they could.
Yep. It was 2001 was a weird year.
I just don't see how you make up a race that was supposed to be a points race after your championship finale.
They made it an exhibition race after.
Okay.
Speaking of 2001, we are recording this podcast on February the 18th. 24 years ago today, we lost one of the greats of the sport, Dale Earnhardt Sr. So rest in peace, Mr. Earnhardt, and we wish you were still here. But moving on, it was Daytona weekend. Old racing season got kicked off. We had so let's rewind a little bit. Wednesday night, they had pole qualifying. And all of us who wanted to participate made our predictions for the front row. And the only one who came legitimately close was JP. He got Chase Briscoe, who won the pole for the Daytona 500, and Austin Cindric joined him on the front row. Thursday night was the qualifying dual races. Dual 1, it was weird. They had a lot of wrecks in Dual 1 that tore up a whole bunch of cars. The first one started when Chandler Smith decided to clear himself on Justin Haley and ended up going head on into the outside wall. It took out Ty Gibbs, Elio Castroneves, I can't remember who else. I was at the store and I saw the replay, and all I remember was Chandler Smith just murdering the outside wall. Bubba Wallace ended up walking away with dual win number 1 on the night, so that earned him a third place starting spot in the 500. And then we move on to duel number 2, and this is where it gets fun. And I can see Brett over there getting ready to spill his guts about this one. Duel number 2 went off pretty good until it didn't about midway through. Right after pit stops, there was an accident that took out Alex Bowman, Brad Keselowski. I think actually both RFK cars were in that. No, Buescher got through. It's Daniel Suarez. All 3 of those cars had to go to backups. And then coming to the checkered flag, there was a wreck coming off of turn 4, and they were about 50 feet from the start-finish line when NASCAR decided to throw the caution. And it looked as though Eric Jones won the race, and then going back to video evidence, it was determined that Austin Cindric won the race based on when the caution lights came on. Brett, I would love to hear your thoughts since you are a massive Eric Jones fan. What is your opinion on NASCAR throwing the yellow 50 feet before the finish line when you know they are not going to slow down?
So the thing is, the argument I got with this is they did the exact same thing to Parker Kligerman at Charlotte Roval, which cost
and Ryan Blaney at the All-Star race.
And they've done it multiple times, and they've done it consistently. But in some races, you'll have wrecks, and they won't call a caution. It's the inconsistency of NASCAR on when they want to throw a caution and where they're calling the timing lines, or where they're calling the cautions at. It was 50 feet from the line. You had a great battle going for the lead. Jones ended up leading at the line, but it was the whole, why call the caution when everybody else has passed the wreck and it was a good battle? Why ruin the good battle just because of a bad call? And then not calling caution during the Daytona 500 for the same exact thing. It's just the inconsistencies that bother me.
Yep, I agree, and we will get to the 500 shortly. Tyler, I don't know if you watched the duels Thursday night. What were your thoughts?
I think that was a dumb call. The fact that they called it 50 feet from the thing. But what actually gets me is the fact that they didn't call it during the 500, which is insane. That's what irks me about this whole situation. If they would have been consistent and actually called it during the 500, I wouldn't be as pissed off as I am about the incident on Thursday. But NASCAR officiating I personally think needs to go to electronic officiating at some point, like especially at the end of races. Like an electronic sensor, maybe determine that if the caution needs to come out or not. And because it's obviously human error is way too much. I think they need to go do electronic officiating.
What are your thoughts, Jayme?
I think about the differences between the wrecks. And did NASCAR feel like they prematurely threw out the caution in the In the first race, probably. If they were to throw in the caution during the Cup race, would that really have made a difference based off of positioning of the cars? Probably not. But the one thing that I will commend them on doing is they do have a legit one camera who's solely focused on just staying on the caution light to give the exact point in time of when the caution comes out, and another camera on the cars. And the way that their systems are designed to do is as soon as that caution light turns on, all of the cameras just freeze when it comes to picture. That way they can quickly and in a timely manner make sure that they can get a confirmed winner. In the case of the duel, it took a little bit of time to get that figured out because they were making sure that they were looking at all the angles from all those freeze frames. And I hate it for Eric Jones, who was based off of the reporting that they were given at the moment in time before they found out that they were looking into it furthermore, that he had already gone out and he was just kind of like he was celebrating a win that he thought was his. And speaking of Eric Jones, or not Eric Jones, of those scenarios, Parker Kligerman not getting his win due to a failed post-race inspection. Him and his team is actually appealing that on Thursday. Now, whether or not they actually win that appeal, I doubt that they're going to win the appeal because it's few and far between where teams actually win an appeal and overturn race outcomes, especially when it comes to post-race inspection. But I just thought that was interesting that came out today.
Yes, and we will get to the truck race in just a minute. Before we get to JP on his thoughts, I agree with what Jayme said about, the caution light and, the exact moment of timing. However, I have a beef with that because had they gone to the caution light in last year's Daytona 500, Alex Bowman would have been the Daytona 500 champion. When they called that race, they called it as Byron crossing the start-finish line before Bowman, and that's how he won the race. Not the caution light, but when Byron crossed the line. So
I hadn't heard that for a reason as to why Byron won. I've just seen that. Yeah, it was a question as to was it when the lights to the lights turning on. I'd seen a couple of different angles that showed Byron just ahead when the lights were on.
Yeah, I had seen multiple angles too, and there was a bunch of angles too as well.
Where you could have looked at it and thought Bowman had it too. Yeah, I saw a bunch of those as well. But yeah. I didn't see anyone say that they just went back to the to where they were running at the start finish line. I didn't see anyone say that.
I believe it was Bob or Jeff Gluck or something. I can't remember, but I vividly remember someone saying that they went back to who crossed the start finish line first to take the white flag because, the wreck with Chastain and, I think it was Cindric happened right at the start finish line, and they crossed the line with Byron just ahead and then threw the caution, and then they said they went back and was like, oh, well, Byron made it to the line first and took the white flag, so he's the winner. So I don't know. I could be wrong. But
yeah, I haven't heard anything like that. And certainly if that was the case, I think that should shine a much bigger shadow onto that because that is not how they've officiated any other races as far as I'm aware over the many years I've been watching NASCAR. It's always been time of caution when it comes to the yellows that end races.
Yeah. So, what about you, Jayme or JP? What are your thoughts on the duels from Thursday?
So, I have an interesting take. Before the season, okay, I did some homework and did some research on this, and NASCAR is supposed to have a war room, for these type of situations this year. Now,
Which
I
they do.
don't know. Yeah. So I don't know if this is a issue of kind of like the NFL where they need to go back to the war room and say, hey, what do you think about this? Does this need to be a caution or can this wait to the end of the race? And it kind of would take the pressure off of the guys at the race car. Yes, do I want to see people safe? Yes. Obviously, if it's a major hit like what the 66 took in the dual race, as we watched the dual race the other night on Thursday night, yes. But at the same time, it needs to be a judgment call, you know, and I guess that's my opinion about it.
Alright. What about you, Ryan? You got anything to add on?
Well, first off, to JP's point there, I don't want it to be a situation where they have to throw it to like an extra like group of people to look over and debate it as a caution or not for, say, multiple minutes while they determine it. Cause like when it comes to the NFL and their booth reviewing penalties or whatever, that's after they've already stopped the play and play has already stopped for their game. In NASCAR, you can't just freeze frame stop the entire race mid crash and be like, okay, here's the point where we throw the caution. And like, yeah, you can certainly review and be like, okay, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have thrown this penalty, or we shouldn't have thrown this caution here, or maybe we should have waited a little bit longer in hindsight. But it's one of those things that calling it in the moment is a very hard thing to do, and that's why I think you almost can't leave that kind of decision up to a electronic system, because everybody's opinion as to when you should throw a caution and for what severity of a wreck is going to be different. I mean, and obviously when we get to the 500, as I mentioned earlier, I think that was a reaction because of the fact that dual race won. We had a caution on the last lap that ended the race. In the truck race, yellow that ends the race. In the Xfinity Series race, we get a yellow right past the start finish line to take the white flag, eliminating almost another full lap from the race. And fans were not happy with, fans on Twitter weren't happy with the fact that we had so many races ending due to the yellow there. Again,
Yep.
I'm not surprised that NASCAR overreacted, even though I think that it's the wrong move. But ultimately, I think the decision on Thursday, I think they got it right. Yes, is it annoying that they threw it so quickly? Yes, but ultimately, I think they got the call right. I think that wreck should have been a yellow for sure. And it just comes down to how quickly the guy on the button decides that, yep, that's a caution.
Yep.
And we've seen fast reactions, sometimes sending us to overtime when we possibly could have seen it end a race. I think there was a Kansas race a couple years ago that, it could have been sent to overtime, but the guy waited on the button. So.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I got one more thing to talk about that, and I feel like it's one of these things that kind of played into it. Between the two specific wrecks that we're talking about, the one in the duel and the one in the Daytona 500, I think the placement of where the wrecks had taken place probably had a factor in it. And I think NASCAR got it backwards. So, during the duel, the wreck had happened coming out of 4, heading into the first tri-oval, leading into the checker flag. The wreck that they did a caution flag way too early on that. But then the Daytona 500, the wreck had happened on the back straightaway as they were getting ready to enter into turn 3. With that, I feel like the caution should have been held, or should have been sent out there, because there was more likely there was less of an avenue for cars to avoid the wreck because of them going into the turn. And that's
Well, but
that's
through
going to
the
be the thing. Like,
tri-oval,
we're
there's
all
not a
gonna.
lot of room for drivers to avoid the wreck in the tri-oval either, but there also just wasn't going to be time for them to change what they were doing based on the timing of the yellow either.
Well, going into the tribal, like, you still have the apron, you still have the grass. There's still and the whole entire track to still get on there. When you're in the banking and going into a turn, you can't go. You have no other options. You can't go on the apron, because then you're just going to spin yourself out going from that severe angled turn into a flat surface, and that's just going to cause
But
more
if
of
I'm
an
not
accident.
mistaken, didn't the 500 crash happen like halfway down the back straightaway? They still had the entire flat of the back straightaway to go, and especially if a caution had been called, drivers could have gone and spread out essentially 17 wide on the back straightaway to try and avoid the wreck.
It was
Before
at like
getting into 3.
it was at like the 3/4 to end mark of the back straightaway.
Brett's raising his hand over there. What's up, Brett?
So
Go
with
ahead, Brett.
what Jayme was saying, the crash on the Daytona 500 happened towards the back end of towards the corner. It was almost like it was about probably 500 yards from where Priest started to do his flip. Probably about right there. So you're going into the curve, and with the speed they're going, you may start a wreck halfway down the backstretch. The end of the wreck will probably end up in the corner. So I agree with Jayme on that. Tri-oval, and it's not like, I would understand if they called the caution with the duels if it was the first 2 cars wrecking. But it was the back half of the 15 that was still running. With the Daytona 500, it was the front of the pack. So there's a lot more cars involved.
Yep.
I would understand if they flipped the calls on that just because of the amount of cars, where it happened, and all that. But
And again, I still think that the 501 should have been a caution, but I also still, even after the fact, don't have a problem with the fact that NASCAR was, again, they have a history of being somewhat quick on the button on these issues. And again, as we've mentioned, you can point to a number of situations, the Blaney incident at the All-Star race, and several other incidents where they've been very quick on the button. And again, the 500 being the stark difference there of why didn't they throw the caution there. And
But at the same time, like, it's a day and age where everyone's going to find one reason or another to complain about something in the race, and the only thing that NASCAR can really do is what they have put in place: have a camera solely on the caution light and the other cameras on the cars, and that's just the best that they're going to be able to do as to whenever they decide to push that caution button. The caution button is still up to human error, and unfortunately, this will probably be an ongoing topic for rest of the year for seasons to come. But I'm glad that they actually made steps to try to make it better. But in this particular scenario with the Daytona 500, I don't think it really made a difference as far as the overall outcome of the race.
Yeah, and again, that's the one thing I will say I actually was thankful about is the fact that them holding the caution. Because what I was really worried about coming down to the end of the 500 was I was worried that after they didn't throw the caution, I thought Byron might have thought that they did, and if he gave up the win, not knowing that the caution flag hadn't come out, then I could see Hendrick fans being absolutely ticked if Byron gave up the win thinking a caution flag had come out because of, obviously, the fact that there probably should have been, and Reddick goes roaring past him.
Yep. Well, I love a good debate, but we do have to move on. Moving on to Friday night, we had the truck race. That was, crash field. Kind of looked like an ARCA race out there, which, we may discuss the ARCA race a little bit. But it saw Parker Kligerman taking the checkered flag under yellow, for once again a last lap crash. But wait, as Jayme mentioned a few minutes ago, Parker Kligerman got disqualified for failing post-race inspection ride heights too low, which in turn gave the win to Corey Heim. And as Jayme mentioned earlier, Parker Kligerman and Henderson Racing will appeal this week the win. You gotta think, that they would appeal because they're such a small team, and Parker described on the Xfinity broadcast on Saturday that is the largest payday in the Truck Series, and that could go a long way for that team, since he's only running part-time for that team this year. But, Brett, what were your thoughts from the truck race on Friday night, if you watched it?
I was able to watch it. I was actually quite intrigued by it. I feel bad for Parker. He worked so hard to get to where he was in that race, to be there for that ending. The main thing I have with that is the trucks were getting so loose and so easily able to spin off of 4 that caused 2-3 wrecks. But for me, it's Parker did what he needed to do. It's more on the team than on Parker.
Well, before we go to Tyler, I did see something about the possibility of him failing the ride heights was due to the way his truck was sitting during his front stretch celebration. Front end of the truck was up on the track while the back end of the truck was on the flat, and they said that could have, conspiracy theorists on Twitter said that may have had something to do with it, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on Thursday when the appeal process happens. But Tyler, what were your thoughts from the truck race? And Tyler froze up. JP, what are your thoughts? Oh.
Hey, right here. I personally didn't watch the truck race, so I really don't have an opinion. So go ahead, JP.
Okay. So, man, what a bomb of a quick race we had. I echo the same thing Brett said, and that was that he feels really, really bad for Parker Kligerman. Now, it's like you all been saying, it's yet to be seen if they will win the appeal, but I think Henderson Racing is making the right decision by doing the appeal, because, yeah, you're talking the biggest race of the year for all 3 major NASCAR series, and you're going to take away a win just because of a right height issue. yeah, you gotta play by the rules, but it's one of those situations where you're gonna pick. What I'm trying to say is I hope that we're not talking about this down the road, and I hope NASCAR can be consistent with this sort of thing. If they're going to do it this time, they need to do it down the road to bigger teams.
Well, but that's the hard part there is the fact that it's next to impossible, if not physically impossible for the fans to know if NASCAR got the call right or not. When it comes to not penalizing somebody, if they choose not to, if the car passes post-race inspection, I mean, for anybody on Twitter or even watching the 500, there's no way to know if a car was within the ride height rule. To know if a bigger team was within it, like if it had happened to say Tricon Garage. If Tricon Garage won the truck race, no way for anybody on from the TV camera to tell, oh, that truck is 1/64th of an inch too low.
Yeah.
JP, you're talking about NASCAR being consistent. You should be a stand-up comedian because your jokes are hilarious. Jayme, what are your thoughts on the truck race, if you have any?
I mean, I like the fact that that I was able to actually like spend some time and actually sit down and watch like the last little bit of the truck race. Had my daughter and my son watching with me, so that was a cool family moment. My daughter enjoyed seeing the wrecks, but the packages that they have for the trucks, like these trucks were swirly. The rear ends were just going sideways, and you could see the wrecks about to happen a mile away. Are we going to touch on the ARCA race next, or can I just go ahead and give my opinion on it?
We will touch on it briefly.
Okay, so I'll hold off on that. But as far as the outcome of the race, it's definitely an interesting take. They Kligerman's group keeps saying that they feel like they have built a pretty significant case to get things overturned, but a lot of drivers have felt like they have built a pretty significant case to get the decision overturned. And it's just never panned out, but because of the purse of the truck race being as high as it was, it's probably just their last ditch effort to see if they can get that purse, because like they said, it would make a huge difference for that small race team, and I was pulling for them. I was happy for that race team. But I mean, it is what it is. The when it comes to a post race inspection, they do give leeways. They understand like things can happen in the race that can manipulate how the car or truck in this matter looks like. But for that truck to fail post race inspection tells me that it was already wrong, despite whatever had happened in the race, and there's nothing you can do from an appealing process to say, hey, your guys messed up and we should get our win. It's just not going to happen.
That's a good perspective. What about you, Ryan?
I was looking for the tweet. I remember one of the NASCAR drivers, I can't remember which one off the top of my head, put out a quote after the disqualification in the truck race, saying how one of the downsides to getting through the race clean is that you don't, because as far as I know, Kligerman made it through the truck race without any sort of, incident, which means he didn't get nearly the benefit of the doubt to any kind of potential issues.
It was Landon Castle that put that tweet out. I know exactly
that
which
was
one you're
Landon
talking
Castle
about.
to put that out after that race. So, and again, it's one of those things where, Kligerman didn't get the benefit of the doubt. I'm absolutely not shocked to see the team appealing, because what's the worst that's going to happen? It's not like they can lose more. They've already lost the race and the entire purse, essentially, through the ride height issue. And I saw a lot of people even possibly saying that was why Byron went and ran his front end into the outside fence during his victory celebration, which in the 500, which again we'll get to, I'm sure, later.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that, because like your car should not be loose enough to where sitting up on the banking shouldn't make a major difference in where the car is. Like your car shouldn't be loose enough to where sitting up on the banking like that shifts where your car's riding at. Yeah, in referring to the sitting up on the banking during post race.
Yeah. Well,
But ultimately, I think it was a pretty good race. I was bummed for Kligerman when it got taken away from him, especially where the win went to somebody that we all assume will win plenty more races. And Kligerman, he is not the kind of guy that you normally will see win races, and especially where he's not full time this year.
Yeah. My whole take on this before we move on to the next thing is, I mean, I may be in the minority on this one, but if you win a race, they shouldn't go to victory lane first. Go to post-race tech first. Make sure the car passes, and then do your victory lane celebration, because Parker Kligerman.
But then you're delaying victory lane for the TV audience potentially 3, 4, 5 hours, and especially for some of these truck races, you then have victory lane celebrations at like midnight. So 1,
yes,
in the stands, and 2, your TV audience won't be able to see it.
Yes, I understand that, but like, you just got to see how awkward that must have been for Parker Kligerman to do the victory lane celebration, and then go through the hat dance, taking all the pictures, accepting the trophy, and then come to find out his truck fails, and then they give the win to Corey Heim, and then he can't do a celebration. He's just like, oh, okay, well, thank you for the win. Let's go on to the next race.
Yeah, and again, I understand that, but it's also a situation of, it's not like inspection is a quick 30-minute process. And even if it was 30 minutes, that would still be a significant time suck for TV and for the fans in the stands to have to wait for 99% of situations, the same driver to come out and celebrate the win.
Yeah. It would be a lose-lose situation. I know. What's up, Brett?
With that idea, they could still do like all those pit road interviews in the meantime, if they're worried about their TV audience.
Well, because like that truck race, what time did the truck race actually finish up? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
I want to say it was about 10:30, 10:45. Yeah,
so I mean, and the inspection process takes, does anyone know off the top of their head how long it takes? I usually say it's about a 3-hour process.
Yeah. I think it was about an hour and a half. I think. It was about an hour and a half post-race.
Okay, so an hour and a half. That's still a lot of time to try and fill with driver interviews, especially if you're keeping everybody waiting to celebrate, because you don't know who the winner is yet. So fill that with victory, or with all the, like pit road interviews and stuff. I mean, An hour and a half is a lot of time to fill.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move on to Saturday. We had a doubleheader on Saturday. We had ARCA and Xfinity. And the ARCA race, man, all I'm going to say is ARCA's going to ARCA. 40 cars started the race, and by lap 20, it seemed like there was only about 20 cars left in the race. Yeah, what was that guy's name? Cletus McFarlane in the race. He was involved in like 2 or 3 wrecks, ended up finally getting eliminated, from that race. And, ended, I didn't watch any of it. I listened to it on Sirius XM, for the most part. And it just seemed like every 3 laps there was a caution. But it ended with, Brendan Butterbean Queen getting his first win in the ARCA series. And, I know Jayme had some thoughts on it, so we are going to start with him.
I mean, as far as like the actual racing is concerned, I mean, definitely should. It was kind of ironic that was the race that was aired on Fox and not the truck race. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But Cletus McFarlane, I think he was probably the best part of the ARCA race, and it wasn't even until after he got out of the car when he said he was having the time of his life, driving around that track like a bald eagle. That definitely gave me Talladega Nights vibes, and if you haven't seen his post-race interview, it's probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen. To the point where people want more of Cletus on TV with the ARCA series, and just to see the kind of interviews, the Ricky Bobby-esque personality trait that he had, it was definitely entertaining, and definitely it was good for TV. I'll say that he was good for TV.
Yeah, he
Absolutely.
definitely gave interview of the century there, and I think it was good that they actually got him up in the booth too to call the race a little bit as well. But Brett, what were your thoughts on the ARCA race?
Like I was saying with the trucks, if you notice with the ARCA race, they were getting loose off of Ford just as much as the trucks were. So it's got to be something with that aerodynamics of the cars. But I have to say, having Cletus McFarlane in the race and giving the post-race interview and being in the booth made a lot more people want to watch it more often. Like I stopped watching when he got wrecked out of the race, and I watched his post-race interview. And then when I was listening to it on the radio, I returned it back on when he was in the booth, because he's not a polarizing, but he's an entertaining figure. It's just having that. The ARCA race aren't exciting because there's not that many known people. You have Thad Moffitt, Butterbean Queen, and Sawalage in there. But a lot of the other racers are unknown. Having that YouTube personality that he is kind of gave it more eyes to it, if that makes any sense, to the product.
Yeah. So we're actually running a little bit long here, so we're gonna go to the Xfinity race real quick. Sorry to cut it a little short, but Jesse Love ended up winning the Xfinity Series race on Saturday night after yet another last lap crash with another caution. Brett, what were your thoughts on the Xfinity Series race? Oh, you didn't watch it? Alright. What about you, Tyler? Did you watch the Xfinity race?
I watched the tail end, and I think it was a pretty damn good race, but the Xfinity cars were really, honestly, I think they were the worst handling cars of the entire weekend, from what I saw. Those cars were
Alright.
literally literally unstable, and I'm surprised there wasn't more wrecks.
What about you, Jayme?
I enjoyed the Xfinity race. I thought I think it was probably one of the better races of the weekend, and I was entertained all the way through.
JP, what about you?
So I was fishing, but, from what I can tell with highlights, pretty good. in my opinion.
All right. What about you, Ryan?
I've got one statement. Death, taxes, and RCR on a super speedway. But yeah, I mean, legitimately, throughout the entire race, it felt like it was basically a foregone conclusion that it was going to be Austin Hill, and then literally the second Austin Hill gets taken out of the race, Jesse Love comes surging to the front, and he doesn't leave the front of the field. Similar to, what was it? Was it last year or 2 years ago when Austin Hill won the duel between him and the 4 Junior Motorsports cars? And it was a 4v1 advantage, and the RCR still came out on top. In this case, it was the 2 Haas factory team cars against Jesse Love at the end of it. There were also, I think, 3 Junior Motorsports cars in the mix too. And again, Jesse Love all by himself for the most part managed to outpower and just drive away from them.
Yep.
So, I mean, massive credit to the RCR guys, because it's rare to see that kind of dominance from one team, especially RCR on a super speedway. We haven't seen that since the Dale Jr. days.
Yeah, that is true.
But it does feel like that removes some of the luck factor out of it, unlike when you look at the Cup winners at the super speedways, where it does feel a little bit like the luck lotto landing on drivers.
Yep, and that's where we're going to get into. So Sunday was the Big Mother, the Daytona 500. They moved the start of the race up an hour due to the threat of weather, and it didn't work. They made it 11 laps in before Mother Nature reared her ugly head and put us under a 3-hour rain delay, which went into the night. Stages 1 and 2 were pretty clean. Stage 3 is where all the action happened. Ryan Preece had yet another violent flip going into turn 3. After Christopher Bell got shoved out of line, hit the wall, came back down, and just ricocheted right off of Preece, who then, I don't know how these guys find these ways to flip these cars, but popped a wheelie and rode the wheelie for about 300 yards before finally blowing over and sliding on his roof, up the banking, back on his wheels, and then hitting the wall and sliding back down. He did walk away. He is okay. Which then brought us down to a green, white, checkered, which we have been talking about most of this podcast. Austin Cindric was leading, going down the backstretch. Denny Hamlin made his move to take the lead. And then that's when all hell broke loose. Looked like Chase Briscoe and Cole Custer tried to shoot the middle, and it didn't work. And ended up causing a massive wreck about 3/4 of the way down the backstretch. And William Byron just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Missed the wreck. Came around turns 3 and 4 to take the checkered flag to be a 2-time Daytona 500 champion and back-to-back first time since Denny Hamlin in 2019 and 2020. And, we've heard opinions all night long about whether or not they should have thrown the caution and, the officiating consistency and all that. But the big question that I have to you guys is a question that I asked last season. The Daytona 500 has not finished under green without a green-white checkered since 2016. 9 years. It's either finished under yellow or with a green-white checkered in 9 years. And that was when Denny Hamlin got his first win in a photo finish with Martin Truex Jr. Starting with Brett, my question is winning the Daytona 500 becoming more about entertainment and luck rather than skill?
I'm going to agree with that. It's becoming more of a entertainment and luck. Because I'm going to quote Denny Hamlin on this. Denny Hamlin said, Earnhardt Jr. and Sr. wouldn't be able to drive in this era of the car. Because it's based on the car, not the driver. And so I think it's more of a luck than anything else.
All right. What about you, Tyler?
I personally so I have to agree with that as well. Like it's literally just about luck. It's not, and it's all about entertainment. They don't give a shit about fucking what it takes to win. It's literally the car. Literally, is so easy to drive. It's basically if you have enough speed to get through the wreck, and if you're up front all night. It's literally it. It doesn't take any skill to win anymore. It's literally luck.
What about you, Jayme? Jayme, it is your turn.
Oh, sorry about that. I don't know. I think there is skill when it comes to driving these tracks. I mean, there's reasons why a Joey Logano, a Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, Austin Cindric, guys like these are always in contention when it matters most in these races. And it's like, yes, Daytona more than others does have a luck factor. I don't think it's one or the other. It's a combination of both. But like, kind of like, I kind of disagree with kind of what Brett said. Like the Dale Juniors of the world, any of the older style racers who used to be really, really good at super speedways, I think they still would fare just fine in this style of racing. They would probably get frustrated because during the race it seemed like the guys that were trying to go just had nowhere to go because they were just stuck 3 wide the entire time. So there would be a frustration factor, but I feel like they would still be able to do what they needed to do to position themselves to be where they want to be at the end of these races.
All right. What about you, JP?
So, hold on. Am I on mute?
Oh, you are not muted.
So, yeah, I tend to agree with everyone else, but I'm going to throw a little wrinkle in this. And that wrinkle is, like we've been saying all night long, safety is number one priority here. So.
All right. What about you, Ryan?
So, to an extent, I can see where people get the storyline, obviously, from some of the underdog winners that we've had, of the luck factor. But I also think, and I'll go ahead and go right to the point of, obviously, 2 of my favorite drivers getting somewhat lucky, Daytona 500 wins, between Michael McDowell and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in recent years. But both of those drivers have very consistently put themselves in position to win these things in the final 10, 15, 20 laps. Now, the problem is that, especially in the last, say, 5 years, when we get to 10 to go, some of these drivers who are getting up into the top 10, like a Cole Custer, like, to some extent, a Ricky Stenhouse Jr., trying to remember some of the other ones that have caused issues as well, but
Joey
a lot
Logano.
of them just kind of shut off their brains, it feels like, once 10 laps to go hits. And it's all about just get to the end, just trying to race as hard as you can, regardless of how many crashes it causes, and also leads to the fact that we've seen a lot of overtimes, even though we have seen races actually end under the green flag once or twice. But I mean, that's a big portion as to why I think a lot of that luck factor is, because avoiding that last lap crash like Stenhouse did to be able to win his Daytona 500, especially, or even Mike McDowell getting the 2 front runners, Brad Keselowski and Joey Logano, to crash each other at the end of the 500 in McDowell's year. But again, both of those drivers put themselves in position all the time for plate race wins, and finally one bounces their way.
Yes. But if you think about it, I mean, I know, in a super speedway race, pretty much anyone, I would say the top 10 is in contention to win the race with the final 2 laps. Byron was 7th going down the backstretch. And I don't know if you guys have seen the onboards. He came within centimeters of getting annihilated by Denny Hamlin and a bunch of other cars. Like I saw Alex Bowman's onboard. He dropped to 16th after the white flag because the spotter told him to go high and he messed up. And when that wreck happened, he was in the back end of Denny Hamlin, and Cody Ware came across his nose, and he just barely missed him and came home with a 6th place finish. He picked up 10 spots in that wreck, and he was in the wreck.
Yep.
So I mean, it is a real big luck thing. But
again, I'm not saying that luck doesn't play any factor, but the people that say that there is no skill anymore at Daytona, or especially at super speedways more generally, this is another thing I keep seeing people again lobbing stuff at Stenhouse, especially after he was involved in one of the wrecks down the stretch of this year's race. When it comes to his super speedway wins, he's actually had to earn 3 out of the 4 of them. Yeah, they haven't really fallen his way due to crashes all that much. So, but again, I just look at it as to the fact that almost every Daytona 500 winner that people chalk up to, oh, look at this random crash or this guy lucking his way there. A lot of the time those drivers put themselves in position 5-6 years in a row, and eventually you're going to get one to bounce your way. Because McDowell was, I look back to the 2019 Daytona 500. McDowell was top 5 near the end of that one. 2020, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think McDowell was still inside. Was McDowell inside the top 10 at Daytona in 2020 as well? But yeah, it's one of those
very
things
good question.
But yeah, it's just one of those things where, again, these drivers put themselves in position. I mean, it's like, look at Denny Hamlin. He puts himself in position nearly every single year. It's no wonder that he's been able to win 3 of these things. And looking at that 2020 Daytona 500 again, obviously you had the Ryan Newman wreck that was so terrifying, but Denny Hamlin made the move to let Newman and Blaney go on by, trusting that that was his best shot to try and win the race, was to let them go and then drive back by them.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move on to our next segment, I'm sorry. It is green flags and black flags. And for our listeners listening new this year, green flags is something that we liked during the race weekend. Black flags is something that we did not like. And we are going to kick it off with Brett. What do you got?
Is that someone talking?
Yeah.
All right, we will circle back around to Brett. JP, what are your green flags and black flags?
All right, so my green flag is Will and Byron getting lucky and getting the Daytona 500. He earned it. He by far was a good addition to Hendrick Motorsports when Jeff Gordon retired. So,
well, everybody seems to forget that Chase Elliott succeeded Jeff Gordon in the 24 car before William Byron came along.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, there was a whole 3 years there before Byron came along.
What's your black flag?
My black flag obviously has to be what we've been talking about this whole podcast tonight, and that is the inconsistency of the calls on the yellow flags.
All right. Tyler, what about you?
Sorry, I was radioing. So what were we talking about? I was talking to
Green,
this guy.
green
Green
flags and black
flag,
flags.
flags.
My green flags was honestly the cup race was actually a pretty good race other than the finish. My black flag is the fucking NASCAR officiating.
All right. That seems to be a hot topic tonight. What about you, Brett? You got one?
So my green flags are actually for move by driver. The save by Riley Herbst starting the green light checker.
Thank you. I was hoping someone was going to say it.
And then the black flag isn't I will agree with everybody on the officiating by NASCAR. Mine is the safety of the cars. If they've been so big on the safety of the cars after the Priest flip, last year, and then the same driver flips in a different vehicle or a different manufacturer, or same manufacturer, different team.
That was 2 years ago, by the way.
Yeah, Priest's flip was 2 years ago.
Anyways,
We get what you're saying, though.
but having the car flip again, even after they made changes to the track for that reason, and even the announcer said with the whole brute flaps didn't deploy like they were supposed to.
Well, see, the thing is with the Priest flip, though, the roof flaps started to deploy when he turned sideways. He was already blowing over at that point. The roof flaps did not deploy because he was literally riding a wheelie down the backstretch. The front of his car was up in the air, and then when it turned sideways is when the air caught it and it flipped over.
Yeah, I gotta give that.
I can tell you right now, the only way they're going to keep these cars from flipping on the super speedways is if they drop them down to about 130, 135 miles an hour, which we will never ever see. These guys will always find a way to flip these cars over somehow, some way.
Yeah, I gotta give that Philly to Bowser Jones.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I think a big thing that needs to be said though about the cars getting up in the air like that is that I think if we have it open, if we open up that floorboard, it doesn't end up acting like a sail.
Can I add on to that, Brian?
Yep.
So they were actually just talking about that, I think on Dale Jr.'s podcast yesterday, I believe. It's like the bottom of that car is literally a freaking airplane wing, pretty much. And once it gets air on it, the car goes over because it's literally acting like an airplane wing.
Yeah, you got such a smooth bottom to the race car. You've got an aerodynamic nose, which is obviously there to cut through the air for racing purposes.
Now, I actually wanted to see something like what F1 does. And F1 has this like wood plank they use to make it rough and have like rough surface area to prevent the cars from going over.
Yeah. What about you, Jayme? What are your green flags and black flags?
So my green flag actually goes out to the team of Joey Logano. When he was experiencing the issues going on with his car, where his car was running hot. The fact that they have processes for every possible outcome that could happen with their car, that they were able to discover that it was a plastic bag that was in the air box of the throttle body that was causing the car to get hot and get some timely cautions to get him back on the lead lap. I just want to, that's my green flag of the weekend. How ridiculously prepared the team Penske is for whatever situation may come their way. Nothing, catches them by surprise. Black flag. I've seen a lot of social media posts of the idea that William Byron purposely hit the wall during his burnout to avoid having a clean race car for post-race inspection. He did not purposely hit that wall. Yes, he hit it while he was doing his burnout, but it was not on purpose. Anyone to say that they purposely have done that to manipulate post-race inspection to make sure that they keep their win, it's just absolutely ridiculous. So my black flag goes out to all the people saying that he purposely did that.
All right. What about you, Ryan?
Well, just to go on back to that one, I mean, I see the comment there to the William Byron thing. Until it happens a second or third time, I find it hard to say that he did it intentionally. But I also look to the fact that, I'm sure we've all seen the photos of what Truex did during his 2017 run, where his cars would always, after the burnout, end up with the bent, I think it was right rear fender would always be bent up in almost the exact same way after I've seen
he's coming out now.
at least 4 of his wins from that year. Again, until we see it more than once, though, I mean, you can't call it out for it is fairly disingenuous to call it out for it happening once. When and if we see it happen a second or third time later on this year, that's when I would say you can start to maybe consider that it's being done intentionally. But my green flags and black flags for the weekend, green flag, I'm going to give it to, honestly, I'll give it to the safety of these race cars, because we've talked a lot about how many crashes we had and the overall safety. I mean, every single driver able to get out of the cars A-okay. I mean, I know Ryan Pre said that we're close to not having that. And obviously I would love to see the safety of keeping the cars on the ground better. But all in all, the cars did their job of keeping the drivers safe, and we aren't going to see any drivers miss the following week due to a Daytona injury.
It's always a good thing.
Yeah. And then my black flag, I could give it to the rain, because I think that's something that no one's really mentioned, because we did at least get the race in on Sunday, is that the weather did still delay that thing like 3.5, 4 hours.
Yep.
But I'm actually going to give the black flag, similarly to what Jayme said. I'm going to give it to some of the fans as well, and I'm going to give it to the fans who I've seen blasting Elio for the fact that, he shouldn't have been in the field and whatnot. And it's like, okay, yeah, he was involved in like 6 crashes in the ARCA race. How many of those was his fault? Arguably 1, maybe 2. But then he got absolutely pile driven after the checkered flag at the ARCA race. In his dual race, he wasn't anything to do with the caution that ended up taking him out in his dual race. And then similarly, he was a complete bystander when Ross Chastain wrecked in the 500, taking him out of contention for the 500. So I certainly don't think Elio was a undeserving driver to be there. He was just a rookie in an unfamiliar spot who had almost every bad luck wreck thrown at him.
Yep. And before I give mine, speaking of wrecks and stuff, I saw a stat earlier today. Trackhouse had 7 total wrecked cars from the duels to Sunday. 7.
Yep.
That's a pretty hefty repair bill for them. And we all saw the news about Pitbull leaving Trackhouse, so I don't know what's going on over there. But my green flags and black flags, I have 2 green flags. Green flag number 1 goes to NASCAR for not being so quick to call or postpone the race after the rain came on Sunday. We have seen that in the past, so props to NASCAR for that. And my other green flag goes to what Brett said, Riley Herbst with the save of the century. after taking the white flag on Sunday. That dude, I saw his onboard. He was completely sideways, facing the pit wall, and saved that car at 180 miles an hour and got back
The
on the
Lightning
track.
McQueen save.
Yes. My black flag, and I am shocked that no one has said it. My black flag, and this goes, I'm copying DBC, door bumper clear here. This goes in the What an Idiot Hall of Fame. Chris Wright in the Xfinity Series race coming to pit road and just murdering the 91 car because he came in at like 140 miles an hour. I don't know what I don't know what in the world happened
and then
there.
the fact that he blamed it on poor communication with the spotter after the fact. Like, that was the biggest thing for me when it came to that one, and I think a lot of us just didn't mention it because we kind of breezed through the Xfinity race so quickly.
I can touch on that.
Go ahead, Jayme.
So, he actually had brake issues that wasn't completely fixed, stemming from the last accident. And yes, there was poor communication, telling him to pit last minute. And when he came down pit road, that's when he realized that he did not have any brakes again. So he tried to, thread the needle, so to speak, to try to make sure that he did not hit anybody because he knew he was coming in hot and heavy. And unfortunately, that thread was not big where he needed it to be because there was a car in the form of a needle right there waiting for him.
Yeah, I mean, again, hindsight obviously being 2020, but when he realized that he didn't have the brakes, I almost feel like he should have tried to thread his way back onto the racetrack and basically roll around an extra lap and then come in by himself when he wouldn't have cars to barrel into like that. Again, obviously, hindsight being 2020, and in the moment, it's hard to make that call.
Yes, but also hindsight being 2020 on that, if you look at the replay, he was all the way down almost against the inside wall and just went dead right. If you realize you don't have any brakes, get off the brake pedal and go left and just go straight down pit road. He had enough opening to go right past those cars down pit road. Yeah, he probably would have gotten a massive speeding penalty, but he wouldn't have taken himself out and another car out either.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, because I've seen a lot of people say that, he was called to pit road late. He pulled down off the banking pretty early on, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a minute since I've seen the replay, but I feel like he pulled off the banking pretty early and still just ran right into the back of the, and ran right back into the back of, who was it? Josh Bilicki in the 91 this week?
I think it was, yeah.
But, yeah, again, it's one of those things, Monday afternoon, driving, easy to say with hindsight that, as to what he could have or should have done.
Yep. What you got, Brett, before we move on?
I got one more black flag.
Alright.
So, I was watching something this morning, I was listening to something this morning, and Cole Custer's spotter started spotting for William Byron during the crash. Because he got confused with the smoke.
Oh.
So Cole Custer's spotter thought that Custer wasn't in the crash and instead was the leader?
He thought he was Byron. He got Byron and him flipped.
Okay, I can understand because they're both red cars. That is a bright number 24 on the side and roof of that car.
If I can find I'll send it in the Facebook if I can find it.
Right. It certainly doesn't overly surprise me, but still funny.
Alright, well, we are going to move on. So race number 2 of the season is Atlanta. Another drafting track now. This is the third or fourth year of Atlanta being a hybrid track. Who was it? Oh, I was listening to Door Bumper Clear today, and they had Bubba Wallace on there, and he said that Atlanta is aging very, very quickly. And he said that the only way, or the only time that they hold it wide open now is in qualifying. So, which tells me that they're, even in the draft at Atlanta, they are letting off the throttle, which could create a little bit more better racing. But we will have to see. I think the temperatures are supposed to be in the 50s this weekend, so it's going to be a little bit cooler out there, down there. But we are going to go into our picks for the guys that are in here, and I have our names on the Wheel of Destiny. And so, the first spin on the wheel goes to Jayme.
And this is for our picks for the race.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to go Joey Logano.
All right. All right, good pick. All right. Next pick goes to Brett.
I'm going to take Reddick.
All right. Put in my phone here. All right, next pick goes to... Oh, who's it going to land on? Going to land on me. I am going to take a guy who I thought won the race last year, Ryan Blaney. I was there for that epic 3-wide finish, and I thought that Blaney had it. All right, next pick goes to Ryan.
All right, in a similar vein, I will go ahead and throw it to the guy I really wanted to have won the race 1 year ago, which is going to be my guy, Kyle Busch, in the number 8 car. I'm going to go ahead and take that one. Also, coincidentally, my Atlanta 3-wide, I got the 1/64th scale cars of that one. It came in today, so I got that. I still haven't gotten my McDowell package yet, though, that I ordered like 2 weeks ago now.
All right. And last pick, I did spin it just for fun. It goes to Tyler.
Oh, I'm going to have to go Chase Elliott.
All right. All right, so I will get the rest of the picks later on this week. Before we close the show out, we have one more segment, and that is Jayme's Trivia. Now, when Jayme asks the question, each of us will give an answer one by one. Jayme, what do you have for us tonight?
Well, per usual, as it always is, it is going to be based off of the track that we are going to. So surrounding Atlanta Motor Speedway, of the playoff drivers from last season, who has the most do not finishes at Atlanta?
Okay, so out of the 16 playoff drivers, who has the most DNFs at Atlanta? All right, let's see here.
And you'll get a bonus point if you can guess the exact number of DNFs.
Wait, what was the question again?
Out of the 16 playoff drivers from 2024, who has the most DNFs at Atlanta Motor Speedway?
No Googling.
All right. Kick it off with Brett.
I'm going to go with Martin Truex Jr. with 6.
All right. Tyler?
Kyle Larson with 7.
All right. All right, it is Larson.
But he did not get the correct number, so we will let it continue for the number of DNFs.
All right, Ryan, how many DNFs does Larson have at Atlanta?
Are we talking just in this new Atlanta Super Speedway era, or are we talking about their careers at Atlanta? Because those are two very different things.
Career.
Okay, in his career, I'll go ahead and I'll say, I think Kyle Larson has, I'll say 7 DNFs. Nope. Okay.
I will say 5.
Wow, nice.
Yes.
I thought that maybe back in the 2014, 2015 days of his time at Ganassi that maybe had a couple of extra DNFs. But also the fact that Atlanta wasn't twice a year back then.
Yes, so Atlanta is not a friend to Kyle Larson. So for those who are making picks, this would not be the track to trust Old Faithful in this. He has an average starting spot of 8th with a best finish of 13th, and his most consistent finishing position with the 5 DNS is 37th.
Wow. All right, so Tyler.
And another thing to add on to that as to why Larson probably wouldn't be a great pick is also look at his super speedway record and the fact that they've turned Atlanta into a mini super speedway.
Yep.
The super speedway record is even worse than his Atlanta record.
Yep. So Tyler gets a bonus point for getting Larson right. Jayme, do I get a bonus point for getting the number correct?
You do.
Awesome. All right. I will get that logged in. All right. So that is going to close our show out tonight. Very, very good episode. Lots of debates. As always, a big thank you to all of our sponsors. Century PC, Sleeves, W Energy, Bulletproof Coffee, Fanatics, Fubo TV. Thank you guys so much for sponsoring this podcast. If you need some 2025 racing apparel, be sure to click on that Fanatics link in our description. I will be doing that very, very soon. But until next time, I am Greg, and for Brett, Tyler, Jayme, Ryan, and JP, whom we lost a little bit earlier, this has been the Lap Down, and we will see you guys right after Atlanta. Deuces.
Deuces.
All right, and